Lamar Jackson was first-team All-Pro, but finished second to Josh Allen in MVP voting and finished second to him in the AFC divisional round. Not bad when you put it like that. But that won't stop Derrick Henry from singing Lamar's praises. And so there's Lamar. The regular season numbers are in line with the greatest players in league history. The playoff numbers, obviously, not quite that. Brew, what's on the line for your court? Now, you never lived in Baltimore, right? But yet
my wife went to
he visited
her residency
at Johns
in
Hopkins?
Baltimore. Yes,
Was she at Johns Hopkins?
Yes.
Really?
Her medical residency. So I was
your
there
wife
all
went
the time.
there. My mom went to Johns Hopkins. So yeah, maybe, you know what? Maybe I could have that team too.
No, my wife's from Baltimore.
Baltimore, you're right. You went on your first date in Baltimore.
We met with the first season the Ravens were ever in existence.
You've been mean to the Ravens.
I mean, it's really unbelievable.
I have not been
all our connections to Baltimore. Brew, what's on the line for your quarterback this season?
The same thing that's on the line for him every year going forward, that he doesn't win the Super Bowl. First, reach it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, he's got to win it. And that is the level of his legacy. The level of his legacy.
Oh,
all right, that's just for emphasis.
Brew thought that was a bar. So
it was definitely a bar. Level of his legacy. Because his legacy, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. He's got the 2 MVPs, right?
Yeah.
He's going to be viewed as like an somewhat all-time great quarterback.
Iconic.
Right? Iconic for sure. Changed the game to a degree. But if he wins a Super Bowl, I mean, honestly, with the way he's getting better every year. With what he did last year, I think clearly top 10 all-time is on the board. Maybe top 5. I mean, the way he's last year, you can't really have a better season than he had. But he has to cap it off with the playoffs. You can't be the only 2-time or multiple MVP winner without a Super Bowl. And you can't play, I don't know about your worst games, but you can't drop off this much in the playoffs. Even last year when he played well, second half he was great, but he hadn't turned the ball over all year. And then he has 2 in the big playoff game. So that, this is a compliment to him, though. I mean, LeBron was here. Michael Jordan was here. Peyton Manning was here. You know, the all-time greats, this is what we expect. You have to cap it off with a championship. And so it's a compliment, but he's also got to get it done.
Yeah, the level of his legacy.
You like that?
That really should have been a bar.
Yeah,
really fantastic. Yeah, is it Dan Marino, or does he win a Super Bowl and suddenly now we're talking about him versus Mahomes and who can win more rings? And every year we're having the same conversation and we're measuring his progress in terms of, okay, he beat Pittsburgh. He finally got over the Pittsburgh hump. And then he finally, in this last playoff run, it was really the tight end that had the drop at the end, and he could have easily won that game, but unfortunately he hasn't. And so when you're a 2-time MVP and really could have been a 3-time MVP,
a lot of people thought he was going to be.
And you can't seem to get over that hump. You're just it's a discussion and a interesting topic every year until you make it something more meaningful.
And listen, we have seen, Peyton Manning is the hope. Because Peyton, and by the way, and I've said this before, I'll say it again, Peyton Manning.
Yeah, and Peyton had his, he had to deal with the Patriots, which is
right.
Yeah,
I want to get to that because he doesn't really have to deal with the Chiefs. He's lost to the Chiefs once in the playoffs. They haven't been good enough in the playoffs to get the privilege of playing the Chiefs. I was on Mina Kimes, my friend but hated rival, her podcast this weekend, and we got in an impromptu argument about the Ravens. And one of the things she said is Aaron Schatz, who used to be with Football Outsiders and created DVOA, which is kind of a catch-all team ranking. The 2 best teams of, I think, since DVOA has existed the last 25 years, over a 5-year stretch, to not make a Super Bowl are the last 5 years Buffalo Bills in first place and the last 5 years Baltimore Ravens in second place. And she made the point, she's like, so that's really, a compliment to Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. And I said, well, it is for Buffalo, but it's not for Baltimore. The Chiefs have beaten Baltimore in the playoffs once. They are not the 90s Knicks to Michael Jordan. You know what I mean? Where it's just every year we have a hard ceiling. And the reason I said the hope is Peyton Manning is because Peyton Manning did eventually get over the hump by winning, but Peyton Manning always struggled in the playoffs. Yeah. Even when they won, he struggled. That playoff run that they won the Super Bowl, Josh, fact check me on this because it's going to sound wrong, but I think in the playoff run he had 4 touchdowns and 7 picks. When they won the Super Bowl, his first Super Bowl
then of course,
and then with Denver, they were a great defense. But he was just in the mix enough that, one of the years your defense is going to come up big. You're going to make a few big plays. But I have been labeled, maybe fairly, I think unfairly, a Ravens or Lamar hater for just being right. And thus far up to this point, where is the line between the hater and the person whose skepticism was proven correct? Because he has been since he's come into the league, you can argue in the regular season, he's been better than Patrick. You could make the argument. You know what I mean? They have the same number of MVPs, but Patrick won his first one when Lamar, was not yet. Well, Lamar was in the league, but he wasn't.
Receivers.
Right. Patrick's had Andy. Patrick's had Travis. You can argue in the regular season he's been quarterback 1. But when you then say in that same time frame in the playoffs, he hasn't been quarterback 10, it is to me now too big of a sample to call it coincidental. So what I wanted to ask you before we move on is, I agree with you entirely that he is truly S-Bob, at least get there or whatever it is. And we all agree if they do it and he pulls it off, even if he doesn't play great, if it's like the Peyton thing, he's minted forever, and you start talking about Lamar versus Drew Brees, you know what I mean? Those types of conversations. The flip side is, what if it's deja vu for the 3rd straight year? What if it's he could be MVP? The Ravens have the best team. All of this, and then once again, you're not even that close. Then how do we talk about Lamar moving forward? That's my question.
It's going to haunt him until he wins the Super Bowl. And I have not agreed with your James Harden take. I used to say, and I think rightly, that Lamar struggled in the playoffs because he was a running quarterback, wasn't a great passer, and teams could focus on that in the playoffs. Now he is a great passer in the regular season. And so but like Coach said, he has gotten over some humps. He got over the Steelers hump.
It's
he
been
played
slow
well.
progress.
He has played better in the playoffs.
Yes.
So, but it is going to taint the regular season praise that he gets to some degree until he wins the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and his own comments where he has said, and you appreciate the honesty, but where he gets antsy was the word he used.
Yeah.
And when he
shouldn't say something
and when
that.
he offered up, man, I still remember losses from Pop Warner. Those are usually parts of a personality that might lead to wanting something so bad that you can be your own worst enemy in the biggest spots. And so I'm just curious to see it because everybody thinks the Ravens roster is stacked. You know what I mean? Everybody, and so they should be right there once again. All right, moving on, to Miami. Tua had some comments about he and Tyreek needing to repair their relationship. Some people thought maybe he should keep that in-house, so he was, making family business public, even though Tyreek really had first done that. Tua clarified exactly what he meant, and he wasn't talking just for himself. So of the Miami Big Three, the coach, the quarterback, and the first ballot Hall of Famer receiver, or maybe you go off the board, who's under the most pressure for them this year?
I would say Tua, just because, we're still can you win in the cold? Can you beat good teams? Can you stay healthy? But he got his contract. He got the 4-year, $212 million, whatever it was, contract. So he's going to be paid. The contracts, he's going to remain the starter as long as he's healthy. So I'm going to say Mike McDaniel because they were 9-8 the season before he got there. They've, been to the playoffs, once since he got there. I think McDaniel's twice. Okay, I think he's a really good coach. But at some point, you have to show the achievements and the accomplishments. Last year, they took a step back. So I think McDaniel is on the hot seat, where if they don't have a good year, maybe if they don't make the playoffs, he could lose his job. Tua's not losing his job. And I think the key for McDaniel is Tua, or a large part of it, being healthy. He's only played more than 13 games once in his 5 seasons, and he wins like 61% of his games. So if he's playing, they will win games. They'll beat the bad, mediocre teams at least. And so that's going to affect McDaniel. So I say McDaniel.
Yeah, it's hard to really pinpoint it because Nick doesn't think that Tua is very good. He thinks he's got real challenges. So obviously that he can't be the issue. And then with Tyreek thinks Tua is great because remember Tyreek said that.
But I think he's softened on that stance.
But he did at one point come on and say he was,
he loved him.
More accurate than Mahomes.
More accurate than Mahomes.
Yeah.
And then in terms of the standard, what's the standard? What standard is he holding everybody to, and who's setting that standard? And this is one of the difficulties of if you come into an environment and you want to go the player coach route, and that's where you start. If suddenly you want to change directions and you're the fun uncle, and then you want to be the disciplinarian, it doesn't really work out because they did have a level of success, and they had a level of success doing it that way. And now you're saying that way wasn't good enough. The players turn around and say, well, that doesn't make any sense. It's inconsistent with what you've been preaching. So I would lean more towards Mike McDaniel. But over his 3 years, he's had 2 out of 3 winning seasons. He's gone to the playoffs twice. But it's been a very Miami-type reign where there's some excitement, but at the end of the day, it's just kind of not good enough.
Yeah, listen, I think it's very clear Tyreek's under the least pressure because while I don't think a lot of his teammates appreciated his comments at the end of the year, I do think a lot of his teammates probably were like, man, I wish I could have said that. You know what I mean? That I had the security and the money and the stature. Just be like, man, this ain't it.
I'm out of here.
Right, because I do think that there probably is some lack of discipline and attention to detail and we've seen some of the reporting on that in the Dolphins locker room that comes from a place of players liking but not at all fearing the head coach. Yeah. You know what I mean? Which it can work, but it can be problematic. And I also think the Tua stuff is interesting because, and I want to be very cautious with how I word this, I feel like Tua played a foolish or reckless style last year, knowing what we know and knowing what he knows about the concussions and his injury history and, you know what I mean, the way he has to play. It felt like 2 years ago, it was very clear he had been coached, how to fall, don't take a hit. And that was, it maybe put a bit of a ceiling on them, but it did allow him to stay healthy, play basically the full season, all of it. Last year, it seemed like he had lost weight after gaining weight and played a more reckless style. And the play that he got hurt on was up. And it's, again, the reason I'm trying to be careful is it's the heat of the moment, I understand. But it felt like if you remember watching it, we're not going to run the tape because it was jarring. But you almost, I think those of us watching that play, the moment he took off, were like, oh no. You know what I mean? Before he even got hit. And then when he came back, there were a couple times where it's like, what are you doing now? And he got away with it. And so I think Tua's in a very unique spot, Coach, because I think he might have decided playing the cautious style, I can't be as good as I need to be a great quarterback. But playing the reckless style, I don't think he's built to handle it. So I don't know what he can do.
He's definitely not built to handle the reckless style. And just circling back to Mike McDaniel for a second, the previous administration was supposedly too hard. And Tua couldn't thrive in that environment. And then Mike McDaniel comes in, and Tua has thrived in a lot of metrics. So I give him a lot of credit for that. So it's a difficult balancing act with all three of these situations because Tyreek wants the ball and he's going to be very demanding, but he may not do the right thing all the time. And then you've got the injury issue with Tua, and then you've got the coaching of, he responds well to one thing and doesn't respond very well to another thing, but that may not be the best environment for the rest of the team to be as successful as they could.
I feel like they needed to, the moment Tyreek said those things, either make it clear he's not going to be on the team next year, or make it clear we don't care at all. It was emotional. It was right after the, you know what I mean?
Yeah, we moved on.
Right. They needed to either be like, Tyreek being Tyreek. You know what I mean? Which maybe would have been letting him off the hook. Maybe they shouldn't do that. But if you're not going to do that, then it needed to be like Peyton Manning with Mike Vanderjagt. Idiot kicker if he's on the team next year. Got liquored up. You know what I mean? But instead, you bring him back. He knows you need him. And then, you know what I mean? And now there is this uncomfortability in the locker room. I just don't think it's
But I feel like Tua was speaking for the whole locker room.
I think
like
you're probably right.
And I appreciate him kind of taking on a leadership role. I mean, he sounds like a real leader. And I feel like they've had conversations with other players and, yeah, Tyreek said this and that. And he feels like, look, I'm the quarterback. I'm going to step up and say something. And I appreciate that. I just don't know how it's going to work.
It's hard for me to accept that when they didn't like the last head coach who was there, who was very demanding, who held everybody accountable, and everybody said, hey, this is no good. Yeah. This is no good.
Brian Flores might have fought Tyreek.
Yeah.
Real stuff.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get more from the show and to check out clips from other shows on FS1.